This year's version of the NHL Winter Classic is now complete, and we have an idea what to expect next year, so we're going to discuss those details. We also have some fines and suspensions to discuss, as well as several trade rumors from Elliotte Friedman's latest 31 Thoughts blog. We'll get into all the latest news coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey, and Happy New Year to everybody. Welcome to 2020. I hope everybody had a great New Year's Eve and great start to their 2020 brand new year here. And let's dive in with today's NHL news. So as I mentioned, today's NHL Winter Classic game held in Dallas versus the Nashville Predators was a very entertaining affair. The Predators certainly came out early, had to lead, and Dallas really stormed back and had an excellent third period to close out strong and get the victory on home ice. Obviously, the ice looked to be pretty decent, but as the game went on, you could certainly see the puck bouncing a little bit more. I do think that as the game went on, the conditions probably were a little bit more difficult to manage, but overall, it seems to be very solid. Certainly had great attendance. I believe that was the second highest attendance in NHL history, with around 85,000 people. Of course, there was over 100,000 people back in 2014 in the NHL Winter Classic game in Michigan. So overall, pretty solid result. Gary Bettman did confirm that next year's Winter Classic will be held in Minnesota. Now, there's some talk and speculation who their opponent might be. Of course, that's going to be taken under consideration between the Wild, the League, as well as NBC, who's going to have the exclusive TV rights in the U.S. Obviously, as much as they want to have a great game with a rival, they also need to be concerned about ratings. As we've discussed before, ratings certainly do play a big role in which teams get selected for many of these events. So there's talk that it likely could be the Winnipeg Jets. They're kind of the favored team right now. Of course, Minnesota and Winnipeg have a fair bit of a rivalry, being in the same division. They've had a playoff series before, but there is some talk that it could be defending champion St. Louis Blues as well, who's obviously a big draw down in the U.S. Of course, recently won the Stanley Cup, certainly having another great season. So it very well could be the Blues. I wouldn't rule that out. Of course, they've been Central Division rivals for a long time as well. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. It'll be a little while before we get confirmation on who the opponent will be. But I think it's fair to say those two are definitely the two favorite teams, and likely going to be one of them who the Wild play in next year's event. Now, as I mentioned as well, we also have some fines and suspensions to discuss. LA Kings defenseman Curtis McDermott is facing a potential suspension. He does have a hearing coming up with NHL player safety from an illegal check to the head against Ivan Provorov for the Philadelphia Flyers. We won't know the outcome of that probably for a couple more days, but however, he is facing a potential suspension, likely going to get a couple of games for that incident. We've also seen some fines given out for last night's game between the Penguins and the Ottawa Senators. Pajot and Malkin both received fines. Pajot's was for roughing, Malkin's was for high sticking, different amounts there, but they were both given the maximum allowed under the CBA for those types of infractions. So certainly a testy affair. Of course, the Penguins also saw one of their top players and proven goal scorer, Jake Gensel, go out with a major injury as well, and certainly is going to be out for a long, extended period of time. So that's not good news at all for the Penguins. Which kind of leads us into the 31 Thoughts segment of our video today, discussing a lot of Elliotte Friedman's latest thoughts, which came out on New Year's Eve, December the 31st. He does talk about many things here, but touching on the Penguins as well, obviously with Gensel's injury. Does this give more opportunity and more lease on life for forward Alex Galchenyuk? Now, there's been talked about before that with the Penguins potentially, hopefully at some point, becoming a full, healthy roster, that he would likely be the odd man out due to his performance this year, and he could find himself traded yet again. But right now, with Gensel being out, I would think that at least for the short term, the Penguins might be in a more of a necessity situation to give him a little bit more of an opportunity. I guess we will see if he can seize that opportunity and actually be more productive, or could a trade still be possible for the still relatively young Alex Galchenyuk, who was drafted quite highly, did hit 30 goals in Montreal, but has struggled with consistency ever since, and is now finding himself bouncing around on a few different NHL clubs, and could find himself moved here yet again. But I think the Penguins would have a difficult time finding a trade partner for him due to his production. He is a pending UFA, so that does make things a little bit easier. But obviously, when a player is struggling, it's not going to be easy to do. But Jim Rutherford has found ways to get deals like this done before, where he swapped struggling player for struggling player. We've seen him do it multiple times last year, so it's certainly something that he could possibly pull off again, but I guess we'll probably have to wait and see approach. We still have enough time before between now and the trade deadline to see what they can kind of find for chemistry. The Penguins have done well this year, battling through a lot of adversity and have been a very resilient group. A lot of their players that have been called up to replace their injured players have performed well. So I guess we'll see if that can continue. Of course, Crosby's still likely going to be out for a little while as well. He is starting to skate more, which is a good positive sign. He was seen at Penguins practice wearing a white jersey, but we did get clarification on that there was only ice time available for him, that he wasn't officially practicing with the club. He was kind of doing his own thing on the ice at the same time. So he's still a little ways away. He couldn't really confirm an exact timeline when he'd be back, but at least he's getting closer, which is a good sign. He is making some forward progress there, and we're not aware of any setbacks here as of yet. So I guess we'll see if the Penguins can ever get healthy, but knowing that Gensel's out for the season, they're certainly not going to get to that point where they really have a full complement of roster for Rutherford to really assess here before he makes moves ahead of the deadline. I know he's been asked before about potential moves as well, and he always kind of played it off that he wanted to wait and see what they had first, and it's going to be difficult to find out this year for sure. Now, of course, jumping over to some other news from the 31 Thoughts blog, we very well might get news, and as early as this weekend, on the future of former Canes captain Justin Williams. Now, of course, he did not retire. He just did not sign a contract, and basically at the beginning of the year indicated he just wanted to take a break from the NHL, see where things go. Rod Brindamore, head coach of the Canes, was asked about a potential return. Of course, he indicated he didn't really know of anything going on, but said he would welcome him back. It would be a great addition. The Canes do have a limited amount of cap space, but of course, based on the season being half over, with contracts being prorated, and they probably could find a way to make it happen, I would think, depending on what Williams will accept. He's been training on his own for the last few weeks, so I guess we will see if he wants to make a return. I do believe that Carolina would take him back, and I do think that he would want to go there as his first choice, but whether or not they can find the right deal to make it work remains to be seen. But we could get news as early as the next few days. So let me know your thoughts. Do you see Justin Williams making a comeback, and is Carolina going to be the team that lands him should that take place? Now, as a reminder as well, now that we're into January, we're January the 1st as I record this video, there's certainly players that can talk contract extension now who weren't eligible before, and those are players who signed a one-year deal before the beginning of this current NHL season. So that kind of brings us to a couple of main players that fall into that category. There are others, but the main ones to watch will be Robin Lehner, goalie of the Chicago Blackhawks, and Anthony Duclair of the Ottawa Senators. Now, in Lehner's case, he's a pending unrestricted free agent, as is his goalie partner, Corey Crawford, who's been with the Hawks for an extended time, had tons of health issues. Not quite clear what the Hawks are going to do with goaltending moving forward. They do have Colin Delia signed for a few more years as well, who's mostly played at their American Hockey League affiliate. Of course, Lehner, I do think, would like to stay in Chicago. Seems to have been a pretty good fit for him during his time there, and I know that's something that's very important to him as well. Going to be the second year in a row that he's played on a different team. He may not want to continue that if he can find himself a good contract and continue playing with a team that he seems to enjoy being a part of there in Chicago. Now, in Duclair's case, he's a pending RFA with arbitration rights, and he's on pace to have a monster season. It was voted into the All-Star game, so it's a big season for Duclair, who's really finally, for the first time in his career, really found a home and really exploded with his potential. So there is talk, could the Sens get him locked up on maybe like a 3-4 year contract, something to that effect before we get too far, or will we actually see him take it to the offseason where he has arbitration rights? It could very well go on another 1 year deal if it makes it that far, but he seems to be really comfortable there in Ottawa. Obviously, it's the first time he's really performed at this level, so they very well might be able to mutually agree on a decent, somewhat short to mid-range contract. Now, when staying with Ottawa, there's also some talk that a couple other big priorities for them, besides deciding the future of Pageau, would looking up Brady Tkachuk or Connor Brown, who are both going to be needing new contracts here soon. Of course, Brady Tkachuk will enter the final year of his entry-level contract next season, so clearly he'll be eligible for an extension this summer as well. So I'm sure that they're probably putting some feelers out there, trying to gauge what that might cost, because that's going to be a big one for the Senators moving forward, and they very well might want to know or at least get an idea where that's going to land in order to kind of help facilitate these other contracts. Because as we know, as long as they have the current ownership in place there, they're going to be on somewhat of a tight budget, and getting all these guys signed might prove difficult. Now, as we had mentioned before in a previous video, there is some talk about Chicago Blackhawks winger Brandon Saad potentially being traded when he returns from injury here. Of course, he's out injured right now. He's got a cap hit of $6 million. His actual cash payout next year, which would be the last year of his contract, is $6.5 million. There was previous reports from NHL insiders indicating a handful of teams were apparently interested in Saad, including the Edmonton Oilers. But Friedman reports in his current blog here that the Oilers did touch base and did inquire about a potential acquisition of Brandon Saad, but now appear to be out of the mix. He's also talked a lot about the fact recently that the Oilers have find themselves not wanting to really move a whole lot of draft picks, that they've really kind of made themselves with other deals in the last number of years be a little short on that, and some of their other higher picks haven't worked out, so they're kind of real cautious here to not deplete themselves too much of their picks and make sure they hang on to their picks and put them to good use at the draft. Hopefully get some good prospects in their system for the future, because they haven't had as many of them work out as they'd hoped for, especially with their number one overall selections that they've had. They don't really have enough to show for that, considering how many times they've picked first here in the last decade. So the Oilers, being cautious on picks, really couldn't get into the Saad market, which also kind of explains why they didn't really push too hard on the Taylor Hall front, because New Jersey was clearly looking for prospects and picks, and they just didn't have enough that they could give up to make that happen. It just didn't make sense. I think we all need to realize that even though the Oilers have done better this year and are fighting for a playoff spot, that they're still sort of in a rebuild here, and Ken Holland's still trying to make sure this team is molded for future success and can't really deplete those assets too much. Otherwise, he's going to end up setting them back further along down the road anyway. So I guess we'll see with the Oilers here. There could be other teams interested in Saad, but for right now, Friedman's reporting that the Oilers are out of the mix. Now, as we had mentioned before, the Maple Leafs had a trio of players that they were willing to move in order to kind of add some depth in other areas, but it is being reported in Friedman's blog that these players actually have asked for more opportunity. Not necessarily that they don't like Toronto, they haven't demanded a trade, anything like that, but it is something that they'd like to have more of an opportunity to play in the NHL. Now, that includes defenseman Ben Harper, who's been mostly in the Marlies organization and the minors, and it does include Timashov, as well as Jeremy Bracco, who's a pretty bright prospect, but it really kind of boxed out of much of an NHL opportunity. If they're going to hang on to a lot of their other talented wingers that have already proven themselves and got longer-term contracts, that's kind of boxed Bracco out of a really much of an opportunity. So apparently these guys have all gone to the Leafs organization and kind of said, listen, I'd like you to find more opportunity for me. If it means being traded, so be it. So I guess we will see what happens, but they're all names that the Leafs could use to address other needs, as we've discussed before. I do think we could still possibly see an upgrade in the backup goaltender situation, maybe add some more depth on defense as well before we head into the playoffs, because clearly this Leafs team under Sheldon Keefe has found ways to win, but they're still too loose defensively and not getting the backup goaltending that they really need. Even though Hutchinson's had some wins, he's still too many pucks are going into the net, and as we get deeper into the season, into the playoffs, other teams are going to really get stronger defensively and really buckle down, and if the Leafs can't score as much to get their way out of trouble, then that's going to be a problem if they can't keep the puck out of their own net. I do think the makeup of that team has to be changed a little bit to have more likely to have playoff success here when we get to the springtime, so I guess we'll see what happens. But apparently those Leaf players have basically asked for a trade for more opportunity with another organization. Now, sticking with players who have asked for a trade, of course, it's been reported for some time that Sabres defenseman Zach Bogosian had requested a trade. It's also been mentioned about other defenders being on the trade market as well, including guys like Miller and Scandella. But it's also now being reported that another Sabre has asked for a trade, and that's forward Evan Rodriguez, who basically just wants to play and get more opportunity and doesn't feel like he's going to get that, or that he really fits into the long-term plans of the Buffalo Sabres with enough of a role that he wants to stick around. So I know there was quotes from head coach Ralph Kruger saying basically that they want players who want to be there. They're going to play players who want to be there and are a part of the solution moving forward. Of course, the Sabres once again got off to a dynamic start this year. I believe they were 8-1-1 in their first 10, and they've really struggled ever since. Without Jack Eichel, they would be really back in the standings. They're really down near the bottom, in my opinion, probably somewhere with the Red Wings. I mean, that team has been rebuilding forever, it seems like. In the last 2 years, they've gotten off to fantastic starts, and they've kind of led us to believe that they're a much stronger team than what they've shown here lately. They both seasons have been the same thing, so they clearly need to address some issues with that club. And some of these players just want to get more of an opportunity, but I understand from the coaching perspective here, if they're not working out, they're not working hard enough, or they just are not getting the job done, why would you play them? And I do think there's a reason why some of these Sabres defensemen that we've been talking about trade rumors for some time have not been moved yet. And there's a whole lot of interest out there there for them, unfortunately, based on their contracts and what else might be out there. I just think the other teams know the Sabres are kind of in a spot where they need to make a move. They're not going to really let them take advantage of it. They're going to push them to get a better deal. And clearly, there's just not much interest in those types of guys. There's been some talk from Friedman about the Devils maybe looking at Sabres defensemen lately, but not really sure that there's going to be a whole lot going on in that regard. But add Evan Rodriguez's name to the list of players that are looking for a trade at a town in Buffalo. Now, Elias Anderson, who of course we know as well, has requested a trade out of the New York Rangers organization, obviously has headed back to Sweden for right now, and we're waiting to find out if the Rangers will officially loan him to a local team where he can play over in Sweden, like we've seen with Jesse Puljujarvi of the Edmonton Oilers. Of course, Julius Honka in a similar situation. These NHL teams are kind of playing hardball with these guys, not wanting to just give them away for nothing or sign them to contracts that they don't seem to be fair here. So I guess we'll wait and see what happens with Anderson, but I do think the Rangers probably will loan him. I think they're better off to let him play somewheres like Puljujarvi's doing so that he can hopefully look good, prove himself, and either work something out to bring him back or at the very least boost his value and opportunity to trade him to get a better return with another NHL club. But we'll wait and see here if Anderson can play over in Sweden or he's currently working and training, waiting for a call from the Rangers to find out his future. That is all your latest news, rumors, and updates for today. So, of course, I always want to know your thoughts and opinions and everything down in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts, and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. And give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.